You found this video by mistake. You were just kind of clicking around and you found it by mistake. Go ahead and click off of it. As easy as you clicked on, you can click off. The reason I tell you that is there's about a 90% chance that you're not mature enough to handle biblical information, especially when it talks about attending church. So is it a sin to skip church? Well, from time immemorial, all the way back from Genesis, we have the example that was God's day. The Sabbath day was the Lord's day. Reinforcing this or reconfirming this, when you get to the law later with Moses, he says, you've got to remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. This is something that we practice, and Jewish culture incorporated it deeply into their belief system. But it's more than that. When you get over to Isaiah, you really begin to see what God had in mind about his holy day. Turn with me, if you would, to Isaiah chapter 58, verse 13. It starts with, if. Now, this is a conditional clause. We know what if then is. If you will do this, then this will happen. If you will do this, then I will do this. And so it is actually a clause within the Bible, a conditional statement that you can begin to test God out on. You can actually test what he says about his holy day. And I don't know about you, but I like formulas. I like to be able to apply things immediately. So there's a lot of people out there that want to get closer to God. They want to be more spiritual, all this kind of stuff. And they kind of go these mystical, transcendental experiences. I like hard and fast items. And this is one. There's an if-then clause in the Bible. If you will do this, then God will do that. And he sets it up very beautifully. It starts with an if. If because of the Sabbath, you turn your foot from doing your own pleasure on my holy day. Wow. If you will turn your foot away from doing your own pleasure. All of a sudden, we have the understanding that the Sabbath day has something to do with sacrifice. Now, we're kind of familiar with what sacrifice is. I mean, Cain sacrificed vegetables, and Abel sacrificed the little lamb, there. And then we've got these tribesmen that will take the virgin up to the top of a volcano and sacrifice to the gods, etc. And so this concept of sacrifice, it's got a very physical construct to it, to where if you actually sacrifice, you actually have to physically do something. And we see here that you physically refrain from your personal pleasure or your own delight. Now fill in the blank there. This is where the Bible becomes very, very personal. It's talking to everybody out there because God has a plan. He's like, I want you to think about what your pleasure is, and I actually want you to deny yourself of your pleasure. Now, isn't that just something? Like if you really want to accomplish something, let's say you want to accomplish something in your health, then you have to sacrifice things to gain that. Well, this is the same thing in this passage of Scripture. If you want to gain something in the Lord, and we'll get to what that promise is in a minute, if you really want to gain something, then you're going to have to sacrifice something. He's like, I want you to sacrifice whatever it is that is your pleasure, whatever it is that you go chase after. And one day a week, my day, my holy day, I don't want your pleasure to even come into account. I want you to actually deny yourself and to begin to put my day above your pleasure. I know that a lot of Christians haven't really deeply thought about this, because when it comes down to it, if there is something pleasurable that pops up, like, oh, I really want to go see this series of games, etc., then it doesn't matter if it's Sunday or not. I just go seek my pleasure. But you'll see here that God actually says, I don't want you to seek your pleasure. It's in direct contrast against it. Like, I want to seek my pleasure this Sunday of just simply sleeping in and having a me day. And God's like, I don't want you to seek your pleasure. I actually want you to put my day as the highest thing. And that's intentional sacrifice. Well, actually what this is an introduction into your life of there being nothing else higher than God. Actually, Sunday is a type of practice for what you're supposed to be doing all week long. This is starting to get touchy. So, since we don't put God first, by going to church and refraining ourselves from the pleasures that we would like to be doing, we begin to put God first. And again, I'm telling you, this is practice because you're actually supposed to be putting God first all the time. And see, actually what has happened is we begin to take God out of the equation and we try to put pleasure into the equation and try to fulfill ourselves on pleasure. You see, a lot of people are not focused on their work. And not being focused on their work, they don't really get any kind of gratification out of life. And so then they begin to make a god out of pleasure. And that actually demeans their work even more so. And they lift the pleasure up. And Sunday just gets in the way. But God actually says, I want you to refrain your foot from seeking your pleasure on my holy day. And this is convicting. This next part is just convicting. If you go back to what the Deuteronomy says or Exodus says about in 6 days you shall do all your work, but the seventh day is the Lord's day. Oh, I don't have a day for pleasure. Now, the Bible doesn't say you can never take pleasure because it does talk about taking trips and taking time off, sabbaticals, things along those lines. But in general, if I'm supposed to be working 6 days and then there's a day to the Lord, that doesn't leave a lot of time for pleasure, which actually kind of helps us to understand what God created us for. He created Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden to work. And if you can actually begin to find meaning and purpose in your work, and you can, then your life becomes more fulfilled, and it takes away some of those empty calories of this pleasure-seeking nonsense that we allow to consume us. If pleasure-seeking is your highest thing, and trust me, I understand it. I understand the pull of wanting to put pleasure first. But things always begin to fall apart and become miserable when pleasure becomes the top priority in my life. So what if we put God where He's supposed to be? If you will turn your foot away from your own pleasure and put my holy day high and do 6 days of your work, all of a sudden you begin to notice a quality change within your life. But let's look at this further. He also says, my holy day. It's God's day. For God, for the personality of God, for who He is. You know, it's kind of like a birthday. You know, when you go to a birthday, it's supposed to be about that person. When you have an anniversary, it's supposed to be focused on your spouse. When you have a retirement party, the retirement party is supposed to be about that person. But you know what I've seen in our culture is we've just totally lost this. People go to birthday parties and it has very, very, very little to do with that person. Okay, yeah, we sing happy birthday to you. So they sing the happy birthday to the person, which is a very short, 30-second song. So you sing this little 30-second song to the person having the birthday, and then you shove a gift at them that you flippantly bought to send their direction, and you have cake. All you have to do is show the present and the cake, and it's meaningless. And so birthday parties are near meaningless. Now, I'm going to tell you something we've done in our family to kind of bring back some specialness to birthday parties, is that everybody at the birthday party has to tell the birthday party person, whatever you want to call this person, the one having the birthday party, something that they appreciate or some kind of memory they've had about them to help commemorate and make the birthday party actually special. But see, we've lost all this. All of our days are kind of running together because there's nothing actually special. And a lot of that is because we have forgot how to make the Lord's day a special day. And if we learned how to make it more special, these other things could become more special as well. Now, let's dive back into the text. If because of the Sabbath you turn your foot from doing your own pleasure on my holy day and call the Sabbath a delight, or make the Sabbath a delight. God puts this on your shoulders that you actually have the ability to make the Sabbath day or Sunday or attending church wonderful and a delight. And actually, the term here, delight, is stronger than the previous term of pleasure. If you'll turn away from your pleasure, secondary term, and call my day delight, primary term, then we get to the clause later of the blessing that is going to be received. It's within my wheelhouse to make the Sabbath day amazing. Wow, really? I didn't know I had that kind of capacity or power. I didn't know I had that opportunity. I mean, I thought the Lord's Day was just boring. That's why I'm missing it. See, it's easy to miss things that are not exciting, especially things that are not appealing and exciting to you at all. Like if they don't have any kind of emotional grab, like, why would I do these things? And so if it's not a delight, no wonder people skip church. But God says that's on you. So my question to you is, what are you doing to make the Sabbath day or God's day a delight? Well, I've got a short list for you. I'm probably not going to like some of the items on the list, but it actually makes it amazing, and I think I can explain that. One of them is to fund the Lord's Day. Fund it. Tithe, give to the Lord's Day. You see, the things that you fund, you don't miss to begin with, okay? So, for instance, I recently funded my daughter's graduation party. We put a whole lot of money into the food and the drinks and some plants and some nice lights and some tables. And am I going to miss that? No. I'm going to enjoy every bit of it because I want to be a part of that. But something else is that we put our money, and the Bible already says this, where our heart is. Just the other day, I gave my boy permission, finally, and I've drug him along for a while, but I finally gave him permission to go buy a motorcycle. And so in this going to buy a motorcycle, he's like so excited that money doesn't even matter anymore. The motorcycle is what matters. And he would pretty much sacrifice. Now, he wouldn't sacrifice anything. He's got a little bit of sense, but you could see that he was willing to pay the price to get the motorcycle. The money didn't matter. Why does the money matter to you? It matters to you because you're not delighting in it. One of the reasons you're not delighting in it is because you're not funding it well. There are people that enjoy, they just eat it up, enjoy their gardens. But calculate how much money they put into their gardens. They've dumped money into that. And so what I would challenge you is maybe even start small. Why don't you find like something you really enjoy? Does that, the rug out in front of your church, does it look ratty? Well, throw it away and buy a new one and put it there. And then, our church doesn't have peppermints. We should have at least peppermints for people. I think our church would be more professional and more approachable if everybody had peppermints, especially after they was drinking their morning coffee. And why don't you fund the peppermint bowl? Or I don't like the way that room over there looks. Well, why don't you buy like $30 or $40 worth of paint? And you get some volunteers and they'll go paint it and make it look better. The things that you fund, you actually enjoy. What are you doing to make God's day a delightful day? The most pleasurable day? We're like, well, I don't think of sacrifice that way as fun, but okay. Well, what else are you doing to help it be the best it can be? Now, see, most people don't see church that way. They see church as, I'm going to attend, I'm going to go there, I'm going to participate, like passively participate, but that is not the best way to enjoy the day, and that's definitely not a way to say, the day was delightful. But if you get there early and you begin to intensely focus on, I'm going to get things prepared, and we're going to have it set up that it's going to be the best that it can be. We're going to clean it to precision. When it's time to sing, I'm going to put my whole heart into it because I want it to be joyful in this place. And I'm going to organize it as best I can. And I'm going to repair the things that need to be repaired. I'm going to make things modern that can be modernized. And I'm just going to, what can I do to make this place the best it can be? And you don't regret things like that. I spent nearly an entire summer building bookshelves around my office. And this was several years ago. I spent a ton of waking hours building these bookshelves out of reclaimed wood, kind of like this thing here behind me, to make this wonderful little library. And to do that, I put my best effort in, and I did all the calculating and drawing and recutting and staining and designing and planning, and my children helped a ton. But in doing that, I enjoy that office, man. I did the best with what I had. I put myself into it. And when I walk in that room, I enjoy going to that room. What are you doing for your church that it's enjoyable when you get there? Further, what about just inviting new people? Did you know that inviting new people always brings excitement? I almost bet you money if you knew that somebody was going to be invited to your house tonight, you'd be like, oh, a new person's coming. I got to put on some presentation. Let's up the game a little bit. At minimum, new people always bring a new vibrancy to the air. They bring newness, freshness, uniqueness. And isn't that a wonderful thing to have at church? Maybe if we invested in that. I just got this flyer in the mail today that said 70% of people that don't go to church haven't even been invited to church. Shame on us. Let's just invite people. Just go invite a bunch of people and see what happens. I'm going to love to be at a place where I invited people to come and everybody looks around like, hey, that man's on fire. He's following the Lord. Look how many people he's bringing to church. What are you doing to make the Lord's Day the best day? Why don't you build friendships? Why don't you go into your church and make those friendships the best friendships could possibly be? These people are they're chasing after perfection. They want to be like unto God. They want to be in the kingdom family. They're trying to put aside their old selves. They're actually really good people to know. And to get to know them is incredibly enjoyable. Everybody doesn't have to be like you. They don't have to be some kind of mirror image of who you are. They got to be 30 and they have to be professional and they have to like this sport for me to like them. That's garbage. I am going on about 30 years of no border friendships. Age doesn't matter. Capacity doesn't matter. Job doesn't matter. I've just invested in the people around me, and it's been a beautiful experience. What are you doing that when you walk in church, it is the place you want to be because you've invested there? What about just investing in the things that I would enjoy to see at church? I would really like to see us have a cornhole team. Well, why don't you organize it? Why don't you plan it? Why don't you set it up? Why don't you sacrifice and get the cornhole boards? Why don't you map out the competition? Why don't you invite other churches to do this thing with you? If you want to see God's house be an enjoyable place, then what are you doing? So you have the power to make church and the Lord's Day more enjoyable. Are you taking delight in that? Well, it's not only that. So it says, and call the Sabbath a delight, the holy day of the Lord, honorable, and honor it, desisting from your own ways. So we're talking about holy and honorable here. Well, what is God saying? Well, one of the things is God wants you to leave your selfish self home. It's about sacrifice. It started that way. Take your pleasures and give them the boot and put God first. Well, in doing that, leave yourself home. Leave the part of you that wants to always be right or to be first or I get to get angry about things or I get to gossip or I get to tech or I need to, I get to play my game whenever I want to. It's leave all of your habits and your old self home because holy means wholly different. It means something completely other. God is actually trying to give you a chance to try on a new self. So when you go to church, leave all of the old self behind and try on this new self. And again, like we said, this is practice for the rest of the week. And if I get there and I find, there is a different and more honorable life, and there is a sacrificial life that is actually worth living and investing myself in a kingdom that is worth investing in, you begin to find something there that will fill you like nothing else. So when you honor it, desisting from your own ways, from seeking your own pleasure and speaking your own word or your own words. One of the things that we should focus on when we get to church is not just listening to the sermon be preached, but actually engaged in discussions about it before and afterwards. Hey, what do you think about Isaiah 58? What do you think about John 13? What do you think about 1 Timothy? And so when you begin to discuss these things, God says, put me first. But on top of that, here he says, don't put forward your word. Now, this is something that is so beautiful, and others have pointed out about conversation, but quit trying to put your words first. Quit trying to put your stories first. Quit trying to put your opinions and thoughts out there on everybody. Why don't you find out what theirs are? It's a day of sacrifice unto the Lord, of putting him first. And he says, not putting your words first, but putting other people's words first. Like, I've got a really cool story about, but what's your story? What is it that you have to say and share? And you will be surprised at how the quality of your friendships change when you begin to put other people first. Now, all of this, if you can leave all your self-seeking patterns behind, you're in for a super blessing. It all started with an if. Do you remember the if? It's an if-then statement. It's a formula statement. It is a very pragmatic application. It's something you can use immediately. If you will desist and restrain yourself from your pleasure and put my day first, from seeking your own pleasure and speaking your own words, then you will take delight in the Lord, and I will make you ride on the heights of the earth, and I will feed you with the heritage of Jacob your father, for the mouth of the Lord is spoken. You will ride on the heights of the earth? That is a metaphor for this being the most enjoyable life that you could actually imagine. Now, some people are like, oh, try it. Try it. Test it. It's an if-then statement. Try it for a year. Try it for a year. Is it worth doing? If it's the best thing you could ever run across, which Jesus said it's like a treasure hidden in a field, you actually want to sell everything you got just to get this treasure. If you could understand this concept of how beautiful a church service could be, or meeting with your church, or celebrating on the Lord's Day, there's nothing else like it to it. It is so emotionally gratifying and so fulfilling. You would feel like you're riding on the heights of the earth. Compare that against your hobbies that are losing their sparkle.